Hi, I'm Michael Killen, and I've invited an artist who has cost me more money than I'd like to think about. I'll get to that in a second. His name is Odis Schmidt. Odis, thank you for coming here.
My pleasure, Michael. Nice to be here.
Yeah, and I might as well take this opportunity to complain about the amount of money you've cost me.
You should.
I walk in my house and open the door, and on the right is a table that you made that my wife bought. On the left, there is this big slab of wood. It's very artistic looking. My wife also got that from you. Worst of all, at every Christmas or birthday, she goes out and buys multiple of these boards, these artistic boards that you made. They look like chessboards, you might say, but they're all different. And she gives them to all the relatives and friends for Christmas. This is getting to be a very costly thing for me, Odis.
I thought it was costly for Joe.
Well, we share the money.
Yeah.
We share the money.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, I had no idea.
Oh, well, now you know. So, Odis, also in Marin and in other places, there is a very important artist named Harry Cohen. He's considered one of the greats, and he lives up in his little shack on a mountain top in Woodacre.
I know him well.
And for many, many years, he's been talking about what a wonderful artist you are, and I was delighted a year or two ago I got to meet you. And so I want to ask you some questions about your work. And okay. I guess before we see any of it, what in your life inspired you to become, would I be correct to say, I know you paint and all that, but you're mainly a wood artist? What do you call yourself?
I just call myself an artist. I've done printmaking, sculpture. I've been a cabinet maker and furniture builder, and I've constructed things. What in my life would make me that way is I feel like I was actually born that way. I have, since a very young age, I've always been fascinated with constructing things. I've always worked with my hands. I've never stopped, and it's always been something that's given me a great deal of joy. It's probably when I was young, I think I was a very difficult child for my mother, and because I was always the kid who, in a classroom, I was probably ADD before there was things like drugs to settle kids down. But my mother was always being called into school, and because I was always the kid who was like kind of getting up and looking out the window and disrupting the class, and I'd have to go down to the principal's office, and I can remember the principal saying, well, he's not a bad kid, but and my mother would just say, well, he's got a lot of energy.
Okay.
But the only thing that really settled me down was always drawing or making things or anything. I would just go into my own world, and I felt very good there, and I wasn't.
We're going to see some of the things from your world, but I want to ask, so you felt you were born to make things and to be an artist, and
I do.
Yeah, that's interesting. I make some art, but I don't think I was born to do it.
No. I agree. I've seen your art. It's fantastic, but you came relatively late to the game in terms of being an artist. But I've really been very fortunate that I actually even could make a living working with my hands. And I always even looked at my being in a cabinet making business, and I did a lot of design work. I always looked at that as being an art for me.
Okay. Now we're going to look at some of your art in a little while, but I would like to know, did you go to college, a university, to study how to become an artist?
I went and I learned a lot of good technique in college, having to do with printmaking and sculpture, metal casting, different types of disciplines that were very helpful to me later on.
But you haven't touched on creativity. You've just talked about tools or techniques, but not creativity.
The creativity was always there.
It was always there.
Yeah.
That's very fortunate. Tell me, what artists have inspired you in your youth, let's say?
Well, very early on, I was inspired by murals made by Diego Rivera when my mother took me to the Detroit Art Institute. There's Diego himself, wonderful artist and muralist, probably one of the greatest. That's the Detroit Art Institute. I remember standing there with my mother when I was 8 or 9 years old, and she had a hard time pulling me away out of there because I was mesmerized by this.
Let's see, there's a lot of machinery, mechanical things, imaging.
It has to do, to me, it had to do with the whole cycle of life. But it involved a lot of machinery, and it also involved very basically people and the industrial age. Diego Rivera was a communist, which was really interesting because he was hired by one of the great capitalists of all time, Henry Ford, to make this mural.
I thought it was Rockefeller.
No, that was in
later
New York.
one.
I believe, and I believe, unfortunately, that mural was destroyed for the politics involved in it.
Okay, and so looking at this work or works, it inspired you.
I was probably unconsciously inspired, but it was one of those moments in your life where you are just pretty much knocked off your feet by the possibility of what a human being can do. And for me, that was one of those moments. I was just thought, wow, a person did this. And then the imagery itself was just wonderfully fantastic.
And did you think it would be nice if you did something like this?
No, not at that time. At that young age, I think it was just something I took in.
You were born and you knew you were going to be a great artist?
Oh, probably, Michael.
Yeah, that's why it's there.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
I felt very comfortable there.
Okay.
It was chaos for me for a few years when I first got out.
Yeah. When will we get to something that you've made?
We can get there right now.
Chaos.
No, this is part of a series I've worked on that has to do with different countries around the world. And I love studying about the history and religion and the politics and the cultures of different places. This one is called Egypt. Egypt. And it has the pyramids in it. It has the constellation Orion, which the Great Pyramid of Egypt is centered toward. It has the Nile. And then it has, to me, the field within it has to do with both weaving patterns and also the chaos of Cairo. So that's what this piece is about. So, and it's just part of a series. I've done quite a few that have to do with different countries around the world.
So you could not make this without either having gone to Egypt, read a handful of books on the subject, looked at a lot of photos, and talked to a lot of folks. And then you filled your mind, and then you went and made this. Basically, what it gets down to is my relatively simple interpretation of my take on Egypt. Egypt. And is this piece of art that big, roughly?
It's like 30 inches high it's about 23, 24 inches wide.
Do me a favor, don't show it to my wife. Don't show it to my wife.
Why?
She'll buy another one. All right, we just looked at Egypt. This is the Vatican.
No, this is called Aztec.
Aztec?
Yes.
How do we get Aztec here?
Well, this is the overall shape toward the top is of the pyramids of the Aztec city, in the Aztec city. The very top of it has to do with the top of the pyramids, where there was a small temple building where they had human sacrifice. The field in it has to do with my interpretation of weaving in the Aztec culture, and also some of the cuneiform or the printing that is on the rock, some of the rocks in the Mayan and Aztec culture. The parts on the side right there, That has to do with what is called the Aztec Sword. I believe it's called the Untitled, and it is made out of obsidian. And I don't know if you realize this, but obsidian is can be 600 times sharper than surgical steel. And it's made from lava rock, lava glass, essentially.
So I want to, again, you needed to have some knowledge about the Aztecs, some other part of the world or whatever, to make this, right?
Yes.
And then I want to say, I look at these patterns over here, and if I was to paint this, I'd go batty. I mean, it's so much work to do this. And you did this with wood. Each piece of colored wood is a different piece of wood?
Oh,
what
no,
is it?
No, actually the process is considerably simpler than it looks. I have my own methods down for what I do at this point, where I can glue wood together with a general idea in mind about what I'm going to be doing. But then I can recut it and then reshuffle the wood from the colors of wood I'm doing, and then to establish patterns. And very often when I'm doing that, I'll add other pieces of wood. Then I may even recut again and add other pieces of wood or reshuffle the pattern. So, and then I do that in a way, I always have a general idea in mind about what I'm doing, but very often as the process unfolds, I see something that's a lot better than what I had in mind that presents itself to me that I go with.
Okay, good. Can we see another piece of your work? What is this one?
This piece has to do with more of a sense of meditation. This piece is called Serenity. And for me, this is a piece that when I look at it, or you do look at it, it's a calming piece for me. And it's a piece that if you can look at it for a while, it's a very centering piece within my feelings.
I feel this belongs in a modern house. I mean, or also a corporate big conference room. I think, the wood would go with the wood of the big tables that they have, and it does have a centering feeling to it.
It could help de-stress some of those great executives sitting around those conference tables.
Yes. Can we see another piece of your work?
Now this piece is the counter.
This is chaos.
Correct.
This is a reflection of your mind. Okay, tell us about how did we get chaos out of that?
I wanted to make a piece that was a counter piece to the one called Serenity. And so what I thought for Serenity is very prescribed piece, very planned out and very precise. And whereas this piece, when I created it, I kept working with it, and I kept cutting the wood up and adding other pieces and juggling pieces around until it got to a point where I felt even confused by it. So therefore, I felt like I had established a point. And when I look at it, it is absolutely chaotic for my mind. And so that was the point of this piece.
Looks quite organized to me.
Well, that's because you maybe have a fairly chaotic mind.
Okay. I don't know. Are there more? Do you have more sample? I'm not ready.
There are.
Okay. All right.
Do you want me to go back to chaos?
No. That's okay. I was in your studio recently, and you live in a place called Kamchi.
Correct.
Kamchi. I heard it.
Kamchi.
Kamchi.
Kamchi. It's an Indian name.
Kamchi.
Yeah.
It's a small town.
Mm-hmm. Very small.
And it's in Mendocino County.
It is. It's about 12 miles east of the town of Mendocino.
Okay. I've been there, and you have a lovely place, something like 40 or 50 acres on top of a hill, and you're very blessed to have such an environment. And then you have a lovely house that I think you designed, and your studio is just amazing with all this equipment and whatever. But you pointed out a big slab of wood.
Mm-hmm.
And you suddenly started talking about, was it the Aborigines in Tasmania, or Australia?
The carving of the, it was a door. It's a couple hundred years old. It was off of supposedly it was off of a shaman's hut in Borneo. It was a piece I bought from an Asian antique store that was going out of business years ago in Berkeley. And I was just fascinated by it. But it was carved out of one slab of wood that I think is teak. But it was probably, when it started being carved, was probably close to 7 feet tall by 3 feet wide, and probably would have been close to 3 to 4 inches thick. And anyway, it's a very fascinating piece, and it's almost, to some people looking at it, it's very disturbing looking kind of piece. It has a head in it that looks like some type of a spirit, and then it's totally surrounded by dragons eating snakes.
Wow. But is this how you operate? You go out to art places, and sometimes you see some woodwork, some art, wood art, like what we're talking about right now, and you buy it sometimes?
If I can, yes.
And now that big piece of art that we're referring to in your studio, are you working on modifying it, turning it into more art? Are you going to sell it?
I have no idea what I'm going to do with it. I've had a couple thoughts about turning it into one thing or another, but I actually have a hard time turning it into anything. It's so perfect the way it is.
So perfect.
Yeah.
All right. Yes, it caught my eye, as well as the other art you have in your shop. What is this?
Oh, this piece is a piece of sculpture. It's about 34 inches tall, and the base is probably about 17 inches by 14 inches. This piece I call Dystopian Dream, and this has to do, the base is like, looks to me, it's made out of redwood, old growth redwood, that was actually the natural shape of it. It was out of an old barn in Comchi, some pieces that I got. But it looks to me very much like rising water, and that has to do with, basically this piece has to do with climate change and the direction the world's going, and security. And the building there it looks to be like it's clad for security, and that's why it's called Dystopian Dream. And nobody's going to be going much of anywhere when something like this occurs.
Oh, interesting. So
yeah.
You're like this other artist I recently interviewed, Dixon 44. He's inspired what's happening in the world around him. But then he's only interested in using things that have been thrown away, discarded, or whatever, bottle caps, to make his art. But you're into things going on in this world, and you're tapping into your own environment. I mean, living in Comchi, Mendocino County, you got wood everywhere. I mean, really, a lot of trees. And
I do.
Does the trees impact what you make? The wood?
I would say they impact me in a way that is very calming and very non-distracting for me. I love, every day I walk out to my shop space, I can look around and it's quiet. I don't see any other residences from where I live, and it's a very peaceful place. Okay. So I can have deep gratitude. It's more than once I've gone, hey, came from Detroit and somehow I ended up here. This is pretty sweet.
Good.
Yeah.
Does this go on top of a table? Where does a piece of art like this go in someone's home or office?
It could go on a pedestal or a table. a desk, wherever you cared to put it.
All right. Do you have another piece of art?
I do. This is a little piece that's just a bit of whimsy. It's a piece called Sail Away, and what this is what the boat was a solid piece of walnut I had, but the pieces on top of it that go like this and then like this, those are actually were cut-offs from another piece of sculpture I made. And I had them sitting around for over a year, and I kept looking at them, and I kept playing with them, putting them together one way or another, and I just couldn't bring myself to throw them away because I loved the shapes and how they were too much. So anyway, eventually I just kind of came up with this idea of this was like a pleasing form to me to put them together in. And then when I put them together, I thought, oh, it's like a boat. So I thought, I'm going to make a boat, and this is something you could sail away on.
I have a question. Before you moved into Mendocino County, you were involved in art? You were involved in art?
Yes.
But moving in, you live in the woods. I mean, you live worse place in a way than Harry Cohen, who lives in Woodacre, Marin. But he's 15 minutes away from civilization. You are at least a half hour.
True.
And the woods had an impact once you moved in terms of making art? Or no? No. It was just a place that I felt very comfortable being, and very fortunate to be able to be there and build myself a home. I don't like, quite honestly, cities all that much, or traffic, or a lot of chaos in my life. And so to live in a place like I live, I'm very fortunate, and I have a lot of gratitude for that. But when I grew up in Detroit, our family had a little cottage in Canada, and during that time, when you're very young, there was no phones, or there was nothing. Parents didn't keep much of a tight leash on kids, so I was able to, from very early in the morning till dinner time, I was able to pretty much just run free, and I spent all my time in the water and in the woods, and I think that had a tremendous effect on how I wanted to spend the rest of my life after having gotten out of Detroit for those summers. Okay, so this is all art, and I heard you make cabinets, and I know you make furniture.
Correct.
And I know, from what my wife has purchased from you, it's just not like something you could get at IKEA, Costco, or Mayfair. It always seems to have an artistic, aesthetic aspect of it, besides maybe being somewhat functional. When you make some of this furniture, must it also have a aestheticness, an art quality to it, or do you also make tables that are just like everybody else's table? What is it with you?
No, I look at it very much as art. The furniture I design and I make, and each piece is individualistic, and everything I do is different. So for me, I'm not trying to necessarily, unless a client or somebody wanted something very specific, I don't usually try to emulate anything in particular.
Okay, I wanted the artist Harry Cohen, who I know is a very, very good friend of yours. I wanted him to join us, and we're running just have a little more time left.
Sure.
If he was here and I was to ask Harry what he thought about your approach to art or your art, what would I get out of him?
I think you'd really need to ask Harry, quite honestly.
But you know him quite well.
Yeah.
You know how he thinks.
I don't want to presume how anybody thinks, quite honestly. But I I do know how he creates, and it's a burning mission. He's meant to paint, and it's his lifeblood, and that I can understand, and I think that's something we very much have in common, because I think I really need to make things and work with my hands. That is very much a life force for me.
Okay, and again, you live up in Camchi.
Correct.
And how do people reach you if they? We got 30 seconds left. Do you have a website? Do you
Well, let me see here. I don't know if it got put up here. They can reach me at odis7@hotmail.com.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest has been Odis Schmidt. He's a remarkable wood artist from up in Camchi, Mendocino County. I am Michael Killen, and thank you very much for tuning in. And Odis Schmidt, thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
All right. The show is over.
It's over. Okay. Excellent. Good. Thank you, my friend.
You're welcome.
It was good.